Hi there, and welcome to the Art for All podcast. I'm Danny Gregory. I'm the co-founder of Sketchbook Skool, or founder of Sketchbook Skool. I'm a person who works at Sketchbook Skool, and I'm, an artist and a writer and stuff. But I do this podcast with my friend John. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm John Muir. I am a scientist, wildlife biologist by training, and nature sketcher, observer, and a sketchbook evangelist. And happy to be with you today.
And now you're a cartoon character.
I am. I got to see that for my first time today. It made me happy. Nice to have an icon.
I think every podcast should have an animated opening, and ours now does. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you actually got to see it. And if you're not watching on YouTube, you can only imagine it. And
spectacular.
There's something about the aesthetics of sort of like 1960s chat shows that appeals to me in this context. So that's kind of how I was imagining it, right? And I think our theme song feels sort of like that too. Feels like it's from another era. Doesn't feel like it's 21st century exactly.
Well, we are sort of promoting analog technology. So, there you go. As you sip your teacup, and we dip into our sketchbooks, there's something wonderful about that analog note taking.
I know, we should make the first analog podcast. How would that work?
I'll send you a letter.
You could send me a letter, and then I could read it in a really loud voice and hope that somebody hears it, and that could be the podcast.
That's right. Yeah, the first podcasts were probably was somebody eavesdropping on people at the next booth at the diner.
There you go. It used to be called conversation.
That's right.
It's an old relic of an idea that we are attempting to keep alive here.
And that's an interesting thing that there seems to be when people start talking about things that matter to them, folks often sort of stop having a conversation to sort of explore ideas and more kind of get into a kind of a debate mode these days. I think we've heard so much kind of talk radio, kind of take one for my team.
Wrong.
Yes. Banter, that we think that that's kind of a legit way to interact with each other. I think it really kind of shreds our ability to think with each other and be able to even change our minds when there's evidence that I might have made a mistake. I know I've made lots of mistakes and I'm still making them. But if you're in kind of that debate mode rather than a conversation, then you can't let the other person have a win. You have to, for your team, show that you're right. And when you're in that mode, there's no way that you're going to be able to think clearly enough to realize that, for me to realize when I'm full of it.
I'm going to have to strongly disagree with you there, John.
Well, there you go again, Danny. That didn't feel right. That didn't feel right.
Is it because like everybody has a microphone nowadays? Look at us. Here we are. We've decided that we have something to say that people should hear, and so we have a platform to do that with. And virtually, it's not to be cliche, but it's that old Andy Warhol, everybody's famous for 15 minutes thing, which is, I don't know that anybody's actually famous for 15 minutes anymore. It seems like everybody's constantly on, and they have just so many opportunities for broadcasting their opinions and points of view about stuff that it seems like we're much less flexible about things, maybe because of that. I don't know.
Hmm. Well, it seems to me that, yeah, everybody has a microphone, everybody has a printing press now, but nobody has an editor.
That's a good point.
And I don't think that I think that there's such a pressure to get content out that sitting on it and thinking about it, um, that doesn't happen. My dad always used to say that when you're feeling really upset about something, and you're going to write that letter. He says, go ahead and write that letter, but then take that letter. This was in the days when people wrote letters. Take that letter and set it aside, because
Right.
that's the
Or
letter that
set it
was
on
to
fire. Yeah.
you, and the letter that you're going to send out is the letter that is after that letter. When you've had a chance to think about it a little bit more and perhaps be able to not communicate how you're feeling, but communicate in a way that somebody else can actually listen to. And sometimes some restraint and time and more thought is going to help us do that. But that doesn't the things that will get you clicks and get you shared around and listened to is the more extreme you are.
Right.
And because
Outrage. Yeah.
it's outrage, anger, that is mighty clickbait. And um, even if you are passionate about something, the the shock of the anger. I mean, the advertisers have found out that that sells both
The
in.
loudest voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's another thing too, though, which is there is so much what we now call content constantly being made, right? There's so much
Hmm.
stuff. It used to be that you'd get, a couple of magazines a month. You'd get the daily paper. There'd be some broadcast professionals who were on your radio. There would be sort of the Walter Cronkites of the world giving you information on your TV. And that was kind of it, right? There wasn't, whereas now there's so much information and there's more information being made available constantly, not just information, but stuff, right?
Yeah,
And
I think
so,
that's a good
so
thing to
what's
call it.
happened is this, yeah. So the stuff that matters the most, the stuff that gets the attention is just the newest stuff. It's just the stuff that's on the top of the pile. Just because you can't necessarily be bothered to go and read stuff from 3 days ago. And so it's the new stuff. And so that stuff isn't, so there's this urgency to make and keep making and keep putting it out there because the only stuff that's going to matter is the stuff that's on the top. And that doesn't, but I think that this has been going on now for several years, but I'm
Right.
also hearing more and more of this phenomenon called creator burnout, right? So, because all these platforms that make money from creative people making stuff and putting it out there for free, incidentally, by and large for free, they make money by selling advertising to it. They're interested in having an endless supply and having a reason for you to keep coming back because there's more and more and more. And so a lot of people who initially were excited by and then making money from creating content are now burning out. They're running out of
Hmm.
ideas. They're having psychological problems. They're getting exhausted. They feel like they can't miss a day. I mean, I have to say I'm somewhat in that category. I mean, I put out a lot of stuff and you have this feeling based on the zeitgeist that you have to constantly do it, that it's only consistency that will reward you with popularity. And so as a result, it doesn't really matter what the quality is. What matters is the quantity. So you just kind of put it out there. But I'm hearing more and more that people are starting to rebel against that, and that maybe people will start putting out things in, put out a season. We used to be on the TV shows. Remember when there was like the new season on ABC and it would
Hmm.
start in September and it would run for like 2 months and then they would do reruns. They got to do that kind of thing, but creative people on social media platforms don't get to do that. So uh, they may start doing that. And I mean, there's definitely going to be a comeuppance of some kind. This is not a sustainable world of creativity right now. This idea that people are putting out huge amounts of stuff, getting paid nothing for it, and feeling compelled to keep going. I mean, we talked about this last time about, you know, how people are now starting to ask to get paid for their content, putting it behind a pay gate. But also, I think it's just about the volume and how do you make it more reasonable. And who wants to listen to it all? You know how many podcasts there are? There's something like 2 million podcasts.
Wow.
Yeah, there's so many podcasts that I'm sure you've had this experience. You go, I'd like to look at a new podcast, and there's so many of them, and then you start accumulating more and more of them, and then you think like, my life is too short. I don't have the time to listen to all this crap. So, and I don't have time to watch all these YouTube videos, and I don't have time to read all these newsletters, and to read the newspaper, and to read the books, and to see the movies, and to watch the Netflix shows. It's incessant. You need 50 lifetimes to get through it all. And again, as you said before, there's not only not editors, but there also aren't that many reliable curators. There's a lot of people who are in the business of curation who are going to say, you know what, I'll tell you what to watch. I'll tell you what to listen to because I've listened to it. But, you know, that isn't always entirely reliable. Anyway, off my soapbox for a second.
Well, the in this increasingly filled, busy world, one of the exercises that I think we have to keep coming back again and again to is deciding what we're not going to do and being okay with that. And so not so much we do want to think about what are the things I want to prioritize, but I think for me, I have to also then be really intentional about what are things that I'm going to take off my plate. And
Yeah, I heard somebody describe that as the not to do list.
the not to do list, I'm going to write that down. Not
Yeah, not to do. Like,
to.
I don't have to do this stuff. Because if you don't have
Yeah,
a not to do list, then your to do list is just overwhelming.
that's right. Um, and there are things that don't produce a product that are really important to be doing. And I think that a lot of the elements that actually, can you still hear me, Danny? My
I can
screen
hear
is
you loud and
frozen,
clear.
and
Go ahead.
oh, good. Um, so I actually have a frozen image of you scratching your head. Oh, there you are. You're back and moving. the So, but yeah, thinking about also prioritizing stuff that doesn't make a product but is really important for being a human being is really good. The time to downtime to do nothing, downtime to the the the, the play, the reading books with your daughter. Um, these sorts of things, they're not producing something, and so they're easy. It's easy to sort of get those to get swept aside by the tasks that have a product associated with them. But for me, I find it's really really helpful to be intentional, to say this is stuff I'm not doing. This is stuff that doesn't create a product um, that is a high priority for me right now. And so that when I'm doing that, I can just be doing that without having some part of my brain saying to me, like, you know what you should be doing right now. It helps kind of tamp that voice down.
Yeah, I hear you, and I intellectually agree with you, but viscerally, I also feel compelled to be productive all the time.
Mm.
Like this weekend, I said, you know, I'm not going to do anything this weekend. And at one point, I found myself on the exercise bike with a video going with an instructor instructing me on riding the bike and like a class. But I also simultaneously had my phone on and was watching a video about how to use a piece of software. So instead of doing nothing, I was actually multitasking, exercising, learning, and sweating and doing all the stuff. And I was like, okay, I guess I guess so. But my brain is kind of, I'm like one of those rats who's been given so much cocaine by pushing the button that it's difficult for me to just like chill and be.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, that's kind of who I've become. It's this
How did that feel?
really productive. It's like, look at me. Now, if only there's something else I could I be drawing while I'm doing this too? No, I mean, I, I think what happens is you, a lot of the time, particularly when you work for yourself, you know, you always have this feeling that you need to be doing more. I think it's like freelancers always have this dilemma, right? Which is, you know, can you ever afford to turn down work? You know, or you have a lot of work at one point,
Mhm.
and then you say, I have so much work I can't do it. Also, I'm gonna. But if I turn it down, then there'll come those times where I don't have work, and why did I turn that other thing down? I could have been doing it now. You know, so there's constantly that tension. I think where we're put in charge of ourselves. When you work for somebody else, then you can go, oh, he's making me work this weekend. God damn it. Or you can say, oh, I want to I get 6 weeks vacation a year, or, you know, those kinds of things. You have this kind of bulwark, this thing that's going to stop you from, you know, and you have something to push against to say, okay, I'm not going too far. But when you're kind of just working for you, a lot of times I find like I can be like the lousiest boss I've ever had, you know, because my boss is like,
Mhm.
certainly you're going to work on the
Work
weekends.
creep.
Certainly, I'm going to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and give you an assignment. You know, I never had a boss that did that before.
Well, the I guess I'm of two minds about this. One is, so I guess I'm going to disagree with myself. I'll try to do it
And
in a
which one,
civil way.
which version of me are you going to be disagreeing with too?
I'm not sure, but this is so here's, or maybe this will be a third point in the room that we'll
The
both
3D
get upset with
debate.
later. Yeah, but so I think that like when you are passionate about a project, you go to sleep wake thinking about it. You wake up in the middle of the night with like three more ideas about it, and it's fun and it's bubbling away.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go for a walk and you don't think about it, and all of a sudden you see dew on a spider web, and it reminds you of this thing, and it solves your problem because it's just been kind of on some neuron back there bubbling away. Um, when I am in a state like that with a project, it is it's delightful. It's fun for me to have this stuff that it feels consuming with my attention, and the focus on it doesn't feel, it's not so much a labor, um, but
So it doesn't
that
feel like work, in other words.
yeah, and 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 there will be times, and let's say, I'm writing a book um, about birds and how to draw birds. So I I work on, I sit down at the table and I work on the little illustration, and the next morning I wake up with a vision of a better way to do that same thing. So there's parts in there where you're putting in the time and the work, but there's a flow to it. There is a lightness, and your interests are connected with what you're doing. For
Mm-hmm.
me, that's really different than when there's things that you should be doing, that you feel these, that I've got to be doing this and this and this and this and this, and it may not kind of carry that same that same energy. These things that you should be doing, it's hard, it's more difficult to kind of get in that flow state where all the ideas are going, and any chance I can get to be distracted of that, my brain often my brain often does. um
Yeah, I mean, I had a thing this weekend where, so I've been I write an essay a couple times a week, and I accumulate a lot of ideas for essays. So I'm reading something, and it'll trigger an idea. So I'll send myself an email about it, or I'll be walking my dog, and I'll suddenly think of something, and I'll send myself something. And so I have all these ideas that are, it might be 4 words, it might be a paragraph that
Mhm.
I wrote. I mean, because sometimes I'll like dictate something to my phone while I'm walking. So I have all these little bits. And when I sit down to write, I will sometimes plumb those, pull one out, see where it goes, see if I'm in the same place as I was when I had that idea. Or sometimes I'll just think of something else and write something else. But I still have that big backlog of literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ideas. And so I'll think to myself, I've got to organize those ideas, because some of them may be the same ideas, but some of them might interact with each other. We've talked about this idea of the second brain a few months ago,
Mhm.
but I think that, then like this weekend when I was on my bike watching this video about software, I was kind of researching, like, is there a system that I could develop that I can take all my ideas and put them into a database and tag them and see how they all interact. And I spent like a fair amount of time this weekend thinking about that and trying to work on figuring out, like, how do I use the software to do this and that. And then there came a point where I suddenly said, this is ridiculous. Like, if you want to just sit down and write an idea, just sit down and write it. Like, you don't
Mhm.
need to have databases with tags. That is just procrastination. That's all you're doing. And so then it's like, well,
Good insight.
but I kind of liked doing it. I mean, I was sort of interested in solving the problem. I thought how cool it would be if I have this like bank of ideas and they're all sizzling off each other. But no, it was just so. Should I do that? Should I do something? I should do something with all these ideas. I should organize these, and I should learn how to do. I can impose those shoulds, and they don't necessarily feel like a burden, but it turns out they're really a distraction. They're
Ooh.
it's like it isn't like, oh, my mean boss is making me do this thing. It's not that. It's this part of my head that's like, let's solve this other problem instead of solving the problem that you is probably the most important thing. So
And
then I
you,
can say to
I-
myself, so should I sit down and write? And is that the should that's bumming me out? Or is it just, I don't know, I'm going down the path of the easier thing or the endless thing? That's another thing about all this organizational stuff and software and is um, it's all stuff that is, fairly easy. It's not as hard as like wrestling with an idea and actually figuring out the best way to write it, which I don't mind doing. But anyway, sorry, I'm a little scattered.
well, I like your distinction of that it's a distraction versus versus a burden. And that got me thinking about distracted from what? And I wonder if that is not that it's a distraction from the work, but it's a distraction from being present. Um,
Mhm.
it's a level of kind of meta meta planning that is so far removed from engaging that it just sort of it has all the feeling of being busy. Um, so it kind of you're deep in busy land, but it's not something that engages you with the world. It's not something that pulls you into a deeper connection with that world. I'm going to
I think
write
that's an
down the
interesting
word
distinction.
busy.
Yeah, yeah. But I think is the, like, if I'm sitting and writing, am I really engaged with the world at that point, or am I engaged with the idea, or am I struggling to come up with the idea, or am I trying to figure out how to write it, or am I is that being present? A lot of times it doesn't feel particularly present to me. I feel like I'm living in my head at that time when I'm sitting down and writing. I'm like in a dream, maybe.
Uh, say a little bit more about that.
Well, okay, so if somebody interrupts me when I'm in that state, it's sort of like jarring, right? It's like being in the flow state. Flow state isn't necessarily like you can be in a flow state and like walk into a door, right? You can be completely detached from reality when you're in the flow state. So, is it being present or is it being present in the flow state that we're talking about? Because you were kind of suggesting that being present is like more important somehow and better.
Yeah. I yeah. When you are in flow, your focus on whatever it is amplified. Whether you're observing a flower or you're involved in a game, um, or even in a book, um, I think you can kind of get lost in all of those experiences. Um, maybe here's a way of kind of playing with this. Let's think about the idea of busyness
Hmm.
as opposed to being creative, but being so busy versus creative.
So, sharpening pencils versus using them,
Um,
Stra- straightening the studio, buying. I've got to go to the art supply store and buy some supplies. Uh, I should do some research and see what other people are doing on Instagram. What kind of birds are they drawing? I should go to the library and look at some books there.
the the feeling that I should be doing something. If I'm busy, I am protected from that feeling because I'm just so busy. I don't have. But if I am um, nibbling an apple in such a way that it makes a monster face, and so that my daughter Carolyn and I can, have our two partially eaten apples talking to each other. Um, that's um, that's being present. It's not being. You're not making stuff. You have to admit to yourself that you're not so busy that I could be answering my emails right now. But no, I'm actually nibbling faces into an apple. Um, and I have to accept that. I have to own that and kind of say that this is actually a higher priority for me than answering those emails.
Mhm.
Apologies to all the people who are waiting on a reply right now. Um,
Yeah, you never read my email that I sent you last week. Now I know what you were
no,
doing.
that's a good
I
example
was
of
like,
it.
what the
That whole
hell?
kind of you sent me this email, I guess, about the cool video that you
I
made.
sent you a lot of very extremely important emails, and I was like, did something terrible happen to him? How could he possibly have ignored these emails? Did I offend him? And now I
I,
find out what you were really up to,
I
nibbling faces
that's right,
into apples.
nibbling faces into apples and then making them talk in funny voices.
I think you need one of those automatic reply things on your email. Sorry, I got your email, but I can't answer it right now because I'm really busy nibbling faces into apples.
That's right.
John Muir Laws. See you
Um,
later.
but yeah, I think that sometimes the busyness is a you can keep yourself occupied with something that prevents you from engaging with people, the world, with your feelings, um, and but to give yourself permission, like the nibbling the time spent nibbling faces into apples is, I think, a critical part of being a human being. For me, it's a critical part of being a daddy,
Right.
and um, you could say that you're not being productive, you're not being creative, but I am producing this little apple, and I am engaging fully in this moment. Oh, maybe there's a thread there that I'm gonna throw this out and then see if it sticks. Um, that when I am now I've lost the thought, but it was
Well,
really
here's a
good. It was
thought.
there a
Here's a
moment.
thought. Here's a thought I had. I'm going to wedge in sideways.
Go.
You're busy creating a person. You're creating memories and perspectives in your daughter. That's what you were doing. So you were actually involved with something that was important,
Hmm.
and
I
that's
agree.
right. So this is because I was thinking about that earlier. It's like the one way of prioritizing it is really not necessarily what will they carve on your tombstone, but what are the things that will resonate in the world in what you're doing. And answering emails may or may not, depends what they are. But I think spending time with people who you love can have effects on their world, on the future. Your daughter might look back on this memory years from now. It may affect how she raises her kids. Those kinds of things. And not that that's the reason you were doing it, but that is possibly the effect of it. So that is a variable in assessing whether it's a useful way of spending time.
So that yeah, that makes me then think about that we have these different roles in our lives, and we we need to prioritize. Give yourself permission to prioritize. Like if one of your roles is I'm I'm a I'm a writer. One of your roles is maybe I'm an artist. It's one of your identities. Um,
Or you're a database manager like I am.
yeah, I think it's so easy, at least in the US, to let your identity of I'm a database manager be more important than, say, the daddy. Um,
Hmm.
there are there are economic forces pushing you towards the focusing on the database versus the daddy. There are social forces um, doing the same thing.
And there are
Um,
people. There's your boss.
that's right. That's right. There's somebody who holds who, in a position of authority over you, with um, saying that your identity has got to that you've got to prioritize that identity over there. Um, and so maybe
And then there's the
that is one
song
of
Cat's
the
Cradle.
blessings of when you if you have a job that you do and then you come home from it and it stays at work, you can then come home, go through that door, and you switch your identities. Both you and I are self-employed and sort of running our own businesses, and kind of that um, and working from home. If you look behind both of us, there is their home. And um, so the ability um, to intentionally leave those other identities behind to give time and space for the the creative side, or um, the the family side. Hold on a second. Um, that is to for those to be valued. Um, it takes intentionality.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's all very well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that isn't another should. Like you should be a good dad, or your wife might say, you know, you should go and play with the kids. You haven't spent enough time with them. I mean, there's shoulds are all around. Shoulds abound. So
Hmm. True.
I don't know that, and and there's I think we think that it's more noble to spend time. Oh, look at him, he's such a good dad. Yes, but he's gotten fired from his last 6 jobs because he was out playing hooky with his kids instead of showing up. What kind of a dad is that? So, anyway, should we move on to another subject? I feel like we're getting deep into this and I'm a little lost. And I had a really burning agenda that we are now.
Let's.
Or do you want to? You still have some toothpaste left in the tube.
I don't know if I do. But we could engage with the other idea, and part of it might come back to this, or it might not.
It's we're Americans. We're free to do whatever we want. All right. So what I was going to do, as regular listeners to this program may know, we have taken the step of publishing our email address and sharing it with the world. And wouldn't you know it, people have been writing back to us.
That's been fun.
So watch, be aware of what you ask for, and there've been lots of really very nice and some very in depth ones. And I wanted to share a couple with you, and see what you think. Here's the first one. It's from Allison Deneen, and she says, "I just wanted to give you some feedback since you asked, and because I know how much sometimes you just wonder, what do people think about this thing I'm doing? Does it mean anything to them? My feedback is simply, I love the show." I was waiting for her to say something like, and I got to be honest with you, you've wasted a lot of my time with your perambulations and peregrinations, and I'm sick of it. But she didn't. She was short and to the point.
There may be a survivorship bias here.
Yeah.
The people who are going to take the time to give us feedback
Right.
are people who are enjoying what we're doing, and the ones who didn't probably are also not going to take the time to sit down and write us an email.
Oh no, I wish that were true. But I hear much more often from people who despise what I do than from people who love it. No, that's not actually true. That's a lie. But what I was thinking you were going to say was that we should be putting the email address at the end of the show, so that way only people who've listened to all of it know how to get in touch with us.
Oh, that would be a safety valve.
Right. But we're not going to. You can write to us at podcast@sketchbookskool.com. As Allison Denis did. Here's one this is one from Joyce L. Fulgren. It was a very long email, and I've just edited a little part of it out because I thought it was interesting. She basically talked in the earlier part that I've excised about how she, when she was younger, was really loved art and loved the idea of going to art school, and basically was talked out of it by various people. And she struggled with it ever since. And then she says, for the last 8 years, I've had a little room upstairs all to myself to do art. It is well appointed, bright, and quiet. And as I push the door open, an overwhelming sense of peace and happiness wash over me. And yet, I rarely go in there. And when I do, I rarely stay long. Everything necessary to make art is there. My younger self, the one who always had a sketchbook in hand, would have been blown away to have all this. She would have been in this room making things every chance she had. The depleted me of today can't appreciate any of it. And this is where your podcast comes in. I chose podcast 41, How to Begin to Create, as this seemed to be what I needed. And as I listened, I began dusting the various workstations around the room. Hearing two people talk about themselves and their art, and to sense the joy they experience while practicing it every day, gave me a noticeable nudge. I played another conversation and began painting eggshells. The podcast ended and I turned off the computer smiling. It was the longest time I'd spent in the room in years. I've been doing eggshell art since age 13, but it's not a passion, and I found it telling that I used it to avoid an unfinished portrait. While listening to your podcast, I enjoy the feeling that I'm sitting in the company of two wise, sensitive, and soulful people who are expressing what the girl in me once felt. And I'm hopeful these conversations will enable me to reconnect and make that inner landscape bloom like never before. Bittersweet email, I would say. But she also talks earlier about how she wanted to be a writer. I have to say, it's such a beautifully written email, and I've read you about a quarter of it. So, Joyce L. Falgren, you need to write more. You need to stay in that room more, I would say. And don't walk on eggshells, paint them. What are your thoughts?
Wow. Um, or yeah, what can you do so that it doesn't feel like I should stay in this room more?
Hmm.
But what does it do? Can you do to sort of shift your identity so that staying in that room more is becomes an accepted part of who you are?
That's interesting. So by being in there, she's being who she is rather than. But maybe that's what she's wrestling with. Is she's afraid to be that
No,
person? That's what it
she
sounds
is
like.
all these different things. Like, as Whitman
Yeah.
says, like, I contain multitudes. So does she. Now tell me her name again.
Her name is Joy L. Fulgren.
Joy. So,
And that's
um,
ironic because her name is Joy.
Joy is is the person in that room creating art. She's also the person who's not in that room. Um, and that, but what can we do so that the part of her identity that sits in that room, painting the eggshells, making art, and um, then perhaps picking up a piece of paper and starting to write, that we give ourselves permission to have that space again, to occupy that space, to say that I'm a writer, I'm an artist. This is this is not just a not just a valid way for me to spend my time, but this is core to who I am, in a way that motivates her to go up again the next day and the next day and the next day. And then a week after that, when other things came up and kind of got out of the habit, to sort of prompt her to do the work to get back into the habit again. Um,
Right, but that's a struggle that we have. I mean, I think hers, and she talks a bit about this earlier in the email, is if you identify yourself as an artist, as a writer, it brings a lot of problems along with it, just in some people's minds. Right? If I'm a writer, then I have to be published. Then I have to worry about, can I make enough money doing it? If I'm an artist, is anybody going to buy my work? All those kinds of things. So I don't have to deal with that. And that isn't to say that being an artist has to involve that, or that being a writer has to involve that. It doesn't, but that's kind of what people often think it involves. And so rather than confront those challenges and try to overcome them, it's better to avoid the identity, right?
well, I guess I'm thinking about the identity more in terms of, not so much in terms of the product, the outcome from it, but more from the action that that person takes. I'm a writer because I'm writing.
Mhm.
I'm an artist because I'm arting. Um, and that because that I am going to identify myself by the action that I take, not whether or not it gets published. Not I am a writer simply due to the fact that I chose to sit down and write, and I gave that, um, in the precious few hours that I have during the day. I blocked out a little box of time to make some special room for that. I made it a priority.
Yeah, and I think your identity, if your identity, as you said, can contain multitudes. You can be you can say I drive and therefore I'm a driver. You can
Mhm.
say I'm a dad because I have kids. You can say I cooked a grilled cheese sandwich, so therefore I'm a cook. That's what I keep coming back to, is that art doesn't have to be the overwhelming identity, and that art doesn't, and while making art makes you an artist, I think being an artist in your life is a perspective, right? It's a point of view that you can do everything with. You can make a grilled cheese sandwich as an artist. You can be a parent certainly as an artist, right? That you can combine the art, being an artist point of view, a problem solver, somebody who combines more than one thing to create something new, all those things that I think help to make you an artist. That doesn't necessarily have to just be because you're up in your room painting eggshells. That's not the only thing. It can be something that you can be while being other things, and none of it really has to do with how you make
Yeah.
money. That's a kind of a weird sort of minimal part of it, of the whole identity thing. But I think a lot of times, I agree with you that I think a lot of times the reason that we don't even want to start doing it is because we have these associations with that identity that are so fraught, so fraught with history and other people's points of view and ghosts and all these other things, that we're afraid by doing this thing we will become that thing, and that thing is terrifying. Um, but instead, by doing it, you can become a new version of that thing, a new version of what it is to be an artist, and that can be positive and joyful.
Um, I didn't really follow the ghosts part. Um,
Ghosts, she's talking about like my father or my third grade teacher said this about that when I wanted to do this. That's a
uh
ghost,
huh.
right? So you're dragging along these ancient voices of people who may be long dead and who may have said something thoughtlessly and probably didn't even mean it, but it resonated so dramatically with you when you were 7 or 14 or whatever, that you're dragging that ghost around with you, clanking its chains and drowning out this voice inside of you because you're afraid of it. So you're afraid that your dad was right, that if you pursue this thing, you will be, destroying your future, or you will be, leading yourself down some path that you can't come back from. That's the ghost that you're haunted by.
The those voices can be absolutely paralytic, which
Yeah.
just sort of another reminder to us to be intentional about the way that we interact with other people around their art,
Mm-hmm.
and to realize that we have faced there are countless times that I have done things that are are not thoughtful, not if I really kind of put my mind to it, that would not have been the right way to do it, or said things um, that were hurtful, were damaging, and that and I have also heard messages that were damaging from all sorts of other people. So what I want to do is, if I'm going to kind of go forward, um, I have to remember that all those comments that are coming through, um, that's just it's because human beings are imperfect. Human beings are foolish, jealous, greedy, beautiful, wonderful, hopeful, hopeless, all those things. Um, it's just part of the human condition. You're going to you're going to get really bad advice from human beings, and you're also going to get wonderful, beautiful advice from them. But isn't it amazing how we often curate those voices and collect the voices that tell us that we can't?
Yeah, because we have a predisposition to that, right? I mean, that's almost a neurological thing, which is we take negative feedback much more seriously than positive feedback. Because right? Because negative feedback, it's like the brakes on your car. It's more important in some ways than the accelerator, right? The brakes in your car will stop you from having a disastrous experience, stop you from dying, whereas the accelerator makes you go faster in that same direction. Maybe you don't need that so much. So I think in general we take negative feedback resonates much more. It affects us, particularly greater people, because in some ways it may be more important. It may be like the warning on, on the bottle that says this is poison. That may be more important than it tastes good. So I think that that's why we take that stuff more seriously. But, I mean, I see it from the comments and feedback that I get by putting stuff out in public, that the vast majority of people are supportive, but then you hear the ones that are negative, right? I think that's just our nature. I think it's really hard to just ignore it. And I think it's even more so when those voices are from people who meant a lot to you in your past,
That's
right?
true.
If your
Yeah.
parent says something to you, that means a lot more to you than if a stranger does.
And you know, when you're a little kid, um, everything that um, that you look at grown-ups as, we don't understand that, we don't have the perspective that they're also these imperfect people who are just doing the best they can and trying to get by.
Mm-hmm.
We think that they've somehow got the answer, and if they say, um, yeah, that's not right, that's not good, you're not right, that you're not good, that's going to stick.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, because I mean, it's essential. You're counting on those people to guide you through your life, right? I mean, that's what your role that your parents have when you're young. You can't just ignore what their input is. That's their kind of their job, even if they're deeply flawed individuals who are leading you astray. Um, Let me switch to a related but different point, which is from Connie McConnell. She talks about various things, but she says one of the things is that really resonated with her from one of our earlier episodes was the power of yet. She said, "I don't
Ooh,
paint people
isn't
yet."
that
Right? She says, "I don't paint people yet, but I have a photo of my late mother I want to try. I may not paint people now, but soon I will be trying. I don't paint still life yet, but there are subjects I keep thinking about. And soon I will work on these subjects all in my own way or process. The concept of yet keeps me grounded. It reminds me that those who are instructing me often have far more experience, that I'm not going to be as good yet. I can work toward that point, though." So that was, I think, your insight was that yet.
yeah the the it's not, I can't take credit for the insight. I uh, am in that case standing on the shoulders of Carol Dweck and Joe Bowler, who are um,
We talked about them during
researchers.
the episode that we did about
The
growth
growth mindset.
growth mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and that's, I mean, that's where the idea of yet kind of really crystallizes into something that is functional, useful, not something that's kind of woo woo, but something that I can go out and apply today. Um, it is um, it's something that that I kind of look for opportunities to get Yeti with my daughters any chance I get. When you have an opportunity for a good yet, um, we 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 talk about it. Um, we laugh about it.
Yet. Well, I was also going to say the one thing that struck out to me about Connie's um, admission was that she still seems kind of results oriented. She says, "I have a photo of my late mother I want to try." And I would just say that if you hang your desire to paint people on just that, this very specific project, I want to do a painting of my mother, that could be troublesome for you.
Mm.
You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
Yeah,
It's kind of like
absolutely.
saying, I want to like have a kitchen because I really want to have a particular fried chicken. It's like, well, you don't build a kitchen around that. And I think similarly, it's like if you want to paint people, and then the first thing you do is take a photo of your late mother and try and paint that, and that's the first painting that you're doing of a person. Boy, that's got a lot riding on it.
There's
And
a lot of pressure there.
yeah,
And the
and then
nose
you
turns
might
out
say, well,
funny, and then you say, I can't do this.
I can't paint people.
I mean,
Look
if
at
we
this.
didn't have noses, just think how much easier it would be if there weren't noses. Um, yeah, yeah. I think that's very um, good thing to kind of pull out from that is that what you the mindset that will kind of let you embrace this is not to get focused on any particular product, especially one that has so much resonance to it.
Right.
As I want to, show my respect of my mother. Because then you're thinking like, if it doesn't come out right, is that disrespecting mom? Not a proper tribute to her, but that is a product. Um, what you might do is think about it. I want to use this, use the process of drawing as a way of going through some old family photographs, drawing from those as a celebration of those moments or a celebration of those people. And just to be doing it as a way of remembering mom, not so much to do it as a way of getting a good mom portrait. But
Yeah,
good mom portraits come from making lots of drawings.
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, why don't you make 100 paintings of your mom? That would be a real good tribute. And that way, if 80 of them sucked, it wouldn't matter, you know?
I like
So
that.
rather than saying like, okay, I'm going to buy an oil paints and I want the painting to be big enough to hang over the dining room table. And I've got to pick out a frame and you just go, it's like, you know what? I think I should go jogging and the Olympics are coming up. So maybe I'll enter. It's just give yourself a break. So yes, maybe you will paint a picture of your mother yet, but don't. It just feels like a high initial hurdle to vault over. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. Also, but just so you know, you have picked the most difficult subject of
exactly,
all the subjects.
exactly.
It's the human face
It's your
because
mother's face. It's even worse.
yeah,
It's your mother's
yes,
face.
that's right. But any little nuance and subtle change of expression, you knew exactly what mom was thinking. So any little brushstroke that is off, any little line that is over that way a little bit too far, or alteration in proportion, it's not going to read right, or you'll be like, the photograph, she's happy. My drawing, she's only kind of she's slightly irritated, because your brain picks up all of those micro nuances of human expressions. There's even a part of your brain that is specifically dedicated to reading human faces and human expressions. It's the fusiform face area, the FFA. So you've got this little FFA sitting there in your brain, and that helps you analyze, the micro expressions on a person's face as they approach you on the bus. And your brain detects, all right, this person is not a threat. This person is, all these sort of things. It's incredibly sophisticated. The
Hmm.
result is when we do human faces, we we are that fusiform face area is also kind of getting in there, and boy, does it know, can it critique that. However, you don't do that when you are drawing a raven, right? um, that region of your brain isn't activated and isn't going to be in there hyper critiquing the shape of that bird.
I would also
Um,
think that it's hard to be objective about what your mother looks like.
mhm.
So I think it's an even more difficult subject just because you may not be able to see your mother.
Mm.
So yeah,
But
anyway, I think
but no, but
we've
your
given her
idea
hard enough
of the
time for her
hundred
dream.
faces, the hundred faces,
Yeah.
what you've got then is a project that is going to get you looking through photo albums and remembering moments and um, looking at different moods and can possibly be more playful and more open to different approaches.
I've made a painting of my mother and it hangs in a gold frame in her house. It's a
Hmm.
painting of when she was a kid and she was with her playing with her dog. Um, yeah, but it was a struggle. Um, let me see if we have a bunch of other things from the email sack, but how about Charmin Crawford? She asked, when the moon appears full for us here in California, does it also appear full for people on the other side of the earth?
Oh, that's a really cool question. So we we had this I had this moon party. I had people in the northern and the southern hemisphere drawing moons, and then the idea was at the moon party, um, everybody would call in from these different points, and we could show our sketches to each other. Um, in my last moon party, only people from the northern hemisphere showed up. So that didn't quite work out the way that I had planned. But later on in a subsequent class that I was doing, somebody who was there said, I wasn't able to make the moon party, but this young man down in Argentina held up his sketches. And his name's Guile. And I looked at Guile's sketches, and it was the same shape of the moon, but it was flipped from my image.
That's what I was going to thought. That's what I was going to say. Upside down, right? Because you're seeing it from the other side of the.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's right. Um, so yeah, if you imagine yourself on a round Earth and you are looking over at the moon from the northern hemisphere, you then imagine a person looking at that same moon in the southern hemisphere. Their feet are pointing towards you. Their top of their head is pointing in the opposite direction.
They're upside down. The moon is the
They
same, but
are
they're
upside
upside
down.
down. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so um, then that image that you're looking at is flipped. Um, and that flip that you get in the moon is actually one of the observable phenomena that is inconsistent with flat Earth theory.
One of many things. Yes. So here's another email from Sarah Long.
Well,
And
actually, but let me just before
oh,
we bump
you have more to
Sarah's,
say about Charmine's
just
question?
because I got to go on this.
I know.
Just so here's what I'm really getting excited about. But so yes, the full moon. You've seen the same full moon. So the phase of the moon is seen by the same phase of the moon is seen by everybody on Earth just from different angles.
So if it's a crescent
The
moon, it'll be like will it be facing the other direction?
Yep. So what I did is I if you were in the northern hemisphere and you were to look at, and there's, let's say, a crescent moon rises in the sky, and you were to start running south as fast as you could, and you're really really fast, right? And you follow the same line, and you run down, you would watch that moon, that rising moon from all of those locations. um, you'd see that rising moon um, start to rotate clockwise as you ran down around the other. So it would be halfway there as you're at the equator, and then you keep running down to Antarctica, and because you've got those water running boots, and then the moon's done a full flip.
So it'd be like a C, and then it becomes like a U, and then it becomes like a
Oh,
whatever the opposite is.
yeah. So the let's say a backwards C, then to a U to a regular C.
Right.
Or if you did it at the other phase, it could start as a C going to, um, let's see, regular C to an
To a
N
table.
to a
That would
backwards
too.
C.
Fair enough.
And then it would rotate the other way if you ran back up north really, really fast. Um, and that's pretty cool.
That is
So
cool.
the moon is, and also a lunar eclipse. The lunar eclipse can be seen by everybody on the dark side of the moon, on the dark side of the Earth. So um, the lunar eclipse is this very democratic event where we all get to experience the lunar eclipse. Um, Not so much for a solar eclipse. That's just something for the people who happen to be right in the path of that totality.
Right, because our whole planet is casting a shadow onto the moon. And
That's
that's
right. The
why.
whole planet casts a shadow on the moon. The moon is actually in the shadow, so that moon in the shadow is what everybody sees. When it's the other way around, when the moon is becoming in the solar eclipse, when the moon rocks between the Earth and the sun, its shadow now drops on the Earth. But its shadow is only a small little dot on the face of the moon. So that little shadow travels across the face of the moon. I mean, sorry, the face of the Earth. And as it does, if you happen to be lucky enough to be under that shadow, you go like, "Ooh, it's an eclipse."
Fascinating.
Annular eclipse is coming up in 2023 in October. Something that I'm starting to do is I'm starting to look ahead at, I've gotten some maps out last night of the path of that eclipse. And I'm trying to, right now, make hotel reservations to be someplace cool in the path of that eclipse. Um,
Where would that be?
so it's going to start in Oregon. It's going to roll through Utah, New Mexico, and then down to Texas.
I remember the last one, they showed a map and it had like the thing, and people were definitely going to rent Airbnbs or hotels to be in the right place at
Yep,
the right time.
I was slow on it last time, but this time I figure if I'm more than a year in advance, I've got a chance.
That's true.
Um, and there's a lot of cool spaces in between there. And if you happen to live in Albuquerque, congratulations. You just have to step outside of your house
Hmm.
and look up, and that'll be cool. So that'll be an annular eclipse,
So
which
then, what about
is
Phoenix? We're probably pretty close to it too. Then
um, well, it's funny you should ask. Um,
I guess you're looking at a map.
well, yeah, I just pulled up a map because I've still actually got them on my computer. Um, and
See, your lunar thing is the same as my database thing. I can imagine you on the exercise bike looking at lunar charts and not feeling bad about it, just as I was watching software tutorials.
um, I, I could see that.
All right.
Um, it's just it's been really really fun. So Phoenix, you will not be in the path
Damn it.
of the full eclipse. You will get a partial eclipse there in Phoenix. If you were to drive up to Window Rock, um, then you would be able to see the full annular eclipse. And in that eclipse, what's going to happen is at the totality, instead of the sun being totally blocked out, because the moon is a little bit closer to the sun than it was in the last one, you actually will get a little ring
That'll be
of
nice.
sun still around the outside edge of it. It'll make a perfect ring
I like that.
around where the sun is. That'll be
A
that'll be fun.
little light donut. Very nice. Good. Well, you know what? I think we are done. We have more
Oh,
email to
what about
answer.
there was that we had mentioned? There's one other email.
There's a bunch of other emails, but I think I'm going to save them. I'm
Oh,
going to save them
okay.
for future discussions because because I have the power. I have the Google Doc that has the emails on it. But we'll discuss it
And
next time. Next time we've already discussed what we think we want to talk about. You're going to be doing a very in-depth presentation, and I hope you bring a poem because everybody says that they like your poems. So try and think of an appropriate poem to go with our discussion, which will be on a subject suggested by one of our readers or excuse me, one of our listeners. So if you have any suggestions, complaints, uh, I don't know, suggestions, complaints, what else is there? Questions,
thoughts,
uh,
ideas,
thoughts, ideas.
poems, and oh yeah,
uh,
send a poem.
Send us, yeah.
Um,
If you have a poem, that's good. If you have an idea, there are there are a lot of nice things that people have sent to us in terms of resources. We would love to have those too. So just send them to podcast@sketchbookskool.com, and maybe we'll share them in a future episode because we like hearing from you. We like knowing that there's somebody out there. So, all right. With that, it is time for the final coda. Thanks to listening to the Art for All podcast. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, everybody.